Hello everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Talking City podcast with your multimedia host and YouTube host, Conor McGilligan. And as always, I am joined by your chief Manchester City writer, Simon Bajkowski. We're here again, we're still talking City even when City aren't playing. And there's no better place to start than Ukraine versus England, of course, with all the City influx there. But to start with, Si, how are you doing, mate? You all right?
Put a bit of pressure on me then, saying I'm, as always...
It is though, isn't it?
Working out how to tell you I can't do the next one.
God.
Well, it's out there now, so fine.
Producers having a meltdown behind the scenes.
Yeah. But, good. Just looking forward to football coming back, even if it's not coming home.
Nice. Like it. So another good segue, as we keep saying on these podcasts. Ukraine, England.
Yes.
Which is, City-wise, we're obviously in further acts going to be speaking about the Champions League coming up, of course, City returning to action, 4 wins out of 4, all that good stuff. But we've got to start with City's players been on the pitch for England, marginally for some, of course, but Ukraine won, England won. Walker on the score sheet, good for him. Positive as well. Obviously, Southgate setting up in a very Southgate way, which we'll get onto in a little bit, but positives there, Walker on the score sheet.
It was almost sort of rubbing salt into German wounds, wasn't it? It was like all the problems that they've got with their national team, and then as if that wasn't bad enough, you see sort of what Bayern could have won with Harry Kane to Kyle Walker for the goal. Yeah, it was a sticky England performance, but Walker is just living his best life at the minute, really, isn't he? He's, can do no wrong with City and can do no wrong with England. I don't know if you saw the two-touch Walker was playing as well with Jude Bellingham and Phillips and Ramsdale, where Walker's just like schooling Jude Bellingham. It's like, what on earth is going on there? But yeah, he doesn't score many goals, Carl. I think that was his first international goal, but he's just flying at the minute. Yeah,
I think he's at this stage in his career, really, Walker, right now, isn't he? Where he's almost, it feels like he's got a bit of not a chip on his shoulder as such, because everyone at City obviously loves him, but there's all of these contract negotiations and his position being up for debate as well within the England ranks at this moment in time. Feels like he's got a real point to prove at the minute, and he's proven it, isn't he?
Yeah, Southgate said after that game that he'd talked him out of international retirement twice and then sort of backtracked and kind of said, maybe that wasn't my news to give. And then Walker was like, yeah, it happened. I think Walker is someone who you've seen it through his career. You've seen when he moved from Tottenham to City and he got a lot of stick for doing that, but he kind of felt he had another level to his game at a time when Mauricio Pochettino, who, fantastic manager, but was sort of saying, no, I don't think he has got that level. Walker, as many people with that mindset do, you see it with Pep a lot, loves proving people wrong, loves saying, you think I can't do that, well I can, and I still can. And Walker enjoys few things more than out sprinting like a 20-year-old and things like that, and still keeping that edge and winning those training games even. And last year at City, he was left out of the Champions League final. He was left out of the team for a lot in the second half of the season, and he had to kind of find an answer to that, really. And it's going to be interesting going forward to see whether he can keep at that level, because John Stones is coming back, and Stones kind of was operating at right back when he was moving into midfield. So will we see Walker kind of in a bigger battle than he has been maybe again this season? That's to come. But for now, Walker has kind of answered every challenge he's got, and he had Bayern fighting to get him in the summer, and he had City go above and beyond to keep him. So he is very much in demand, and he is showing why, really.
And the new deal with that, obviously been spoken about in the minute, it's not signed, sealed and delivered yet. He was asked about it after the game, and he was a little bit more, sort of sheepish about it. I'm not, drawing conclusions there, but it's one of those things where I think he was more focused on his performance after the game for England.
Yeah. He spoke to us after the Fulham game that City played, and it's done. It'll happen. So the fact that City are signing a 33-year-old on for 3 years tells you how much they wanted to keep him, especially when, they only offered Gundogan 1 year for a long time. Gundogan spoke about that this week, I think, this week, yeah. Or last week. I lose track of time. But basically saying, City didn't give me a proper offer until May when it was almost too late and I didn't want to think about things because, City were going for the treble and Gundogan didn't have time to process it. And that, as much as people may try and say otherwise, that really was a huge factor in Gundogan leaving because City didn't think that he was worth more than a 1 year deal until it was too late. And I mean, there's also an argument to be had that maybe he wasn't worth more than a 1 year deal, but his form in April and May and June meant that it looked ridiculous that City didn't offer him more than that by the time that they were. So maybe City have realised through Gundogan that we need to offer a bit more than we normally would to keep players of such importance. And having lost Gundogan, having lost Mahrez, City really didn't want to lose Walker this summer, and that is kind of reflected in that 3 year deal that is definitely coming.
Would you have given Gundogan a longer deal?
Yeah. Well, I would have given him 2, but like I say, I think the debate became more kind of ludicrous because Gundogan was so important and scored those goals like against Leicester, against Everton, against United, wins them the FA Cup basically, and you're saying, is he only worth 1 more year? Like, I think City's issue was like, when will his legs go kind of thing, and the need to kind of move players on even when they necessarily don't think they should be moved on. And we've seen they bought Kovacic, who's younger, and they bought Nunez, who's younger as well. So they have refreshed that midfield, but kind of when Gundogan is playing as well as he was, even for his age, you think, well, let's probably keep him on. And I think it's difficult because you can set these kind of parameters as a club and say we won't offer more for a 30-plus-year-old or whatever. But when they are as good as those players can be, it then says, well, maybe because they are exceptional, maybe you need to offer an exceptional deal. And the Walker deal is certainly exceptional.
But it's like we were speaking on the last pod as well when we're talking about players being irreplaceable. We bought Mark Bernardo and Kyle Walker. Gundogan was unbelievable for Man City, but I still, if I was looking at the profile of player, would think that Gundogan is probably replaceable in the long term, whereas Walker's just so unique.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think he scored like 40% or higher of Gundogan's goal for the season came like after April. So again, if you're looking at it over 12 months, then maybe he scores 10 goals and you think we can replace that. But it's the fact that he always kind of delivered in those final months when it really mattered that makes you think it's difficult to replace. But it is still more sort of manageable to replace someone like Gundogan than it is Walker. And sort of even though he lost his place in the team for a lot of the second half of the season, you saw kind of with how he handled Vinicius in those 2 legs against Real Madrid that he still has a really important part to play, even if it wasn't maybe as important a role as he wanted. So it looks like he's got a more important role this season. Obviously the captaincy is up for grabs. And now Walker didn't commit to staying for these 3 years if he doesn't get what he wants, and that's what you want as as a club, as players, as managers. You want people who are never satisfied, and there's a lot of mystique into what makes City so special and winning as much as they do, and that is a big part of it. This kind of motivation that is never satisfied.
100%. I completely agree with you. It's that satisfaction word is probably what Pep. I don't know, would Gundogan have been any different? You don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but it's interesting what you say there about Southgate and him potentially twice retiring. Man City's not satisfied with what's going on. You offer me a deal, I want, they'll have negotiated the terms. He's got a very, very good deal at Man City, like we spoke about for the age he is. It's interesting because with the new EA 24 game that's coming out, which we'll be reviewing on the channel, of course, it was so interesting the last couple of years because I think he's seen some of his stats, Walker, and I think they've recorded him and he's just not been happy. And it all comes back to that satisfaction thing, isn't it? It's always that level up, and it doesn't matter how old he is, he's still got that mentality of, I am this good.
Yeah. And it is, players, why should they care what rating their speed is on a game? Why should they care what mark I give them out of 10 in a player rating? But it's like they really do. They're obsessed with being the best at absolutely everything.
Do you think that's because since they've been 16, 17, 18, everything's been measured quantitatively?
I think so, yeah. And I think it's hard for us not in that kind of elite professional mindset to...
What are you talking about?
to get into it at times. But... I think they're just so conditioned to being the best at what they do that it is very hard and very jarring to then kind of be told that you're not. And you see it with, say Jack Grealish, who looked heads and shoulders above any Aston Villa player and then came to City and suddenly he's not the best at sort of everything. And he struggled with that, to sort of come to terms with finding his place and working out what he actually was the best at and what he could do. There's a lot of his first season was spent like passing to De Bruyne, which is completely understandable if you think there's Kevin De Bruyne, he's the best player ever, I will give him the ball. But obviously there was a lot of time when City actually wanted Grealish to have the ball. So it's just finding that medium. But Bernardo Silva said when he re-signed his contract extension, he talked about how good City are at winning and how he wants to keep winning, and you can see why.
Talking about a team who doesn't win frequently enough for my liking, England. 24 minutes was what Phil Foden got against Ukraine, and really interesting because it kicked off a little bit online. Me and you've spoken about this online, which isn't always the metric for sense and logical viewings. But in this sense, I do kind of agree with the masses. We've spoken a little bit off air as well. I mean, basically, Gareth Southgate has essentially turned round, and I'm paraphrasing, but said Phil Foden doesn't play centrally for his club, and almost sort of, insinuated that he doesn't see a long-term future there for Phil Foden within the England ranks. He said he doesn't for his club, said Southgate, addressing Foden's prospects of playing in midfield, so presumably there is a reason for that. But he's fundamentally wrong, isn't he, this season? So that's the problem with what he's saying.
Yeah. It's tough. It's really tough because, we've discussed and debated Phil Foden a lot this season, and sort of said, even some of Pep's comments have been a bit strange. He was either the eve of the first Premier League game, I think it was the Community Shield, where Guardiola, having played Foden in midfield kind of all summer, then turned around and said, oh, well, he still has loads to learn. And you're like, when is he ever going to pick him in midfield?
Southgate's saying the same, though.
Yeah, but so this season, he hasn't always played in midfield. He did play in midfield centrally against Newcastle and ran the game and was outstanding. And when he's been picked out wide, more often than not, he's ended up in the middle with Alvarez. Now, City's formation has changed a bit this season, and Foden has played more as a sort of 10 than an 8, which relieves him of some of the defensive responsibilities that Guardiola sort of has said why he doesn't play as an 8 more. And Southgate's going on about that as well and saying, the work off the ball basically he wants more of. The debate with Foden, the sort of counter-argument with Foden is always, well, how do you expect him to get better in the middle if you don't play him in the middle? And from a sort of England and City point of view, well, you can sort of understand why Foden might not get in the team ahead of Kevin De Bruyne or Ilkay Gundogan or, you know, Bernardo Silva even. You can't understand why he can't get in ahead of just Jordan Henderson. Can't even say his name. Like, Henderson is nowhere near the level of De Bruyne. So Foden should be starting Foden should have been starting ahead of, like, Jordan Henderson at his best. So Jordan Henderson, when he's felt kind of so unloved at Liverpool and out of favour that he's had to go to a rubbish league to play, there really shouldn't be a debate. Now, if Southgate wanted to come out and say, look, you don't appreciate the work that Rodri does at City to, you know, protect the midfield, and Rodri plays like two players, or they've got John Stones coming in as a midfield pivot alongside Rodri, or they've got Kovacic. Like, I don't have that in my team. I'm playing Bellingham as sort of the furthermost midfield, and I've got Declan Rice. I want a bit more stability and defensive reinforcement that Foden doesn't give. Fair enough, but he's not said that. He's just said, well, Pep doesn't pick him, so why should I? Which is a bit silly.
Yeah. It just seemed really bizarre as well, because, you know, it's like, obviously your system's completely different to Pep Guardiola. Your ideology, your philosophy is worlds apart. There's no comparative needed between a Pep Guardiola system and a Gareth Southgate system. So I don't understand. I get the clamour, because the questions will have been directed towards, well, Pep doesn't get asked these questions, but Pep does get asked these questions, doesn't he? It's a conversation.
Yeah, and, you know, Pep will be asked again on Friday about Foden in midfield, and will give an answer. But Pep has always said as well, like, don't copy me just because I'm successful. Like, don't think that because what I do with my team, you can put it in your team. And there aren't really kind of... You obviously see a lot of Guardiola's influence in football, but you don't see anyone really playing identical to City. Is that
a detriment to a lot of these players who play, like, obviously with Spain, we've seen with Enrique, it's been a very similar style of football, and Rodri's been able to transfer that. But when you're looking at someone like a Grealish or like a Stones even, or a Foden, are they going to be impacted in a negative way, because it's not that Pep Guardiola style of football? Is completely different.
Yeah, I think the City style and sort of the Guardiola style is so it works so well together that players are built for the system, and when they go out of the system, they struggle to be as effective. So in the way that you've not really seen anyone leave City and kind of be transferred out of City and sort of do better than they were doing at City, and, you know, you wonder kind of, you know, would Bernardo Silva, would there be any club where he could kind of shine as well as he does for City, because he is built for their system. But at the same time, you have Spain winning major tournaments when Guardiola's at Barcelona, and there's a strong kind of Guardiola influence in that Spain team. You have Germany winning when Guardiola's at Bayern, and there's a really strong Guardiola influence at Bayern and in that German setup. And, you know, England have done better since. Now, Southgate gets on with Guardiola and is influenced by him, and you've seen he's made use of the fact that Guardiola's improved City's England players and made them a lot better, and they are better footballers when they go to England, so they can adapt. And I think it is overwhelmingly positive, Guardiola's influence on national teams, but at the same time, like you say, you just can't compare like for like, because Foden is very different in a City setup than he is in an England setup. And even if he can't quite, you know, get what Guardiola wants of him from a central midfielder, he's surely doing enough to get in ahead of, you know, the competition in England. And it's been I've obviously not been there with Southgate and England for the games and the press conferences, but it has felt kind of a bit out of character from Southgate, both what he said about Southgate and how sort of underprepared he was for the questioning about Jordan Henderson in sort of surely you're expecting people to ask about Henderson's selection, and Henderson's obviously given this huge interview about it, but it does just seem oddly defensive when he should be coming out and saying, this is my style, this is what I believe in, this is how I think these players are best to fit in my team for what I want to do, rather than just saying, well, go and ask Pep.
And we could talk about this all day, but it's interesting with what we were speaking about in the last pod in terms of like regeneration and how Pep's been able to renovate that side. It's like now still Southgate is going down that same mantra, that same framework, those same players who he's still been almost, indoctrinated into using for so many years now. And that evolution needs to happen at some point. And it's so interesting what you were saying there about the Germany side and the Spanish side where Pep was filtered almost into everything. You have that Spain side like Iniesta, Xavi, etc. I feel like those managers at that point will have just seen those players and almost gone, right, we sort of adapt to you. We will play almost in a Pep sort of way because that's getting the best out of them. Southgate is almost negating these players from being able to hit their top level, and you're seeing that. I mean, even Grealish, I know it sounds daft, but checking back and giving it to the central midfielder like he does frequently. You're not seeing that for England. He's trying to get the ball and do what he did at Aston Villa. So it's like regression in a strange sort of way for a period of time.
Yeah, but then you see kind of like Alexander-Arnold take on the John Stones role for Liverpool, and then suddenly that's like the best idea ever for England. And it's like, Alexander-Arnold, he might be better in midfield than he is in defence for England. He's not a better option in midfield for England than Foden is in midfield. So it's like, if you're going to take the principles, you kind of need it all to be coherent. And also, like, there was a load of issue around, should Henderson still be picked now he's gone to the Saudi League. I don't really have an issue with it for the first squad, but you've got to think that, like, a tournament's coming next summer, which isn't very far away. Now, do you want to be starting to play Phil Foden in your England midfield in April when you're saying, all right, he's had 6 months in City in midfield, so he can now play at a lower level in a worse team with 2 months before a major tournament? Or do you want to start getting him in now because Phil Foden is going to be more important to your chances of winning Euro 2024 than Jordan Henderson is. So,
but you know what he's going to do, though, don't you? You can already see it.
Unless if you're thinking Henderson's going to be part of your plans for, I don't see now why you should be starting any England player that you don't think is going to be starting or a big part of your Euro 2024 team.
Agreed. Anyway, enough Southgate bashing.
And I quite like Southgate. I have done, yeah. He's been a very good England manager, but you sort of start now wondering, and it's a bit daft saying on the one hand, well, Foden doesn't play for City in midfield, so why should I play him there when Maddison doesn't play left wing and you've shunted him in there because he looked good in training. So, yeah, I like Gareth Southgate. I found his decisions and explanation of decisions a bit weird this time, and Foden will be key to Euro 2024 if they want to win it, so get him in ASAP.
Yeah, and he's got just a plethora of options now, the plethora of English players that are in form as well. We've just mentioned a few of them there, but even when you look at Jude Bellingham, he's got a whole host of... It's a luxury, but also it's a little bit of a curse for him now because you're going to have to really test his managerial prowess. Like, where are you going to fit the best players in to get the best out of them? Because the target is going to be by the FA, English fans, is to go out and win it in Germany. So what are you going to do? You've got Jude Bellingham in there who's flying at the minute. You're going to put him in the 10. You're going to keep him defensive like we've seen him before. You've got Declan Rice in there, £100 million player.
The front six that everyone wants to see is Rice, Bellingham, Foden, Saka, Grealish, Kane. But maybe that's too attacking. Maybe that doesn't give it enough defensive cover. But if it doesn't, Gareth Southgate has to come out and say, this is why I'm not playing these six, because they are the most talented front six, and they would start as a front six in kind of most clubs, which is a higher level than international football. So, it's just at the point where if you're not picking them, you've got to kind of have a very good reason for why not, and the reasoning that's been given hasn't been good enough.
Yeah, attack is the best form of defence, I think. That's how I'm going with it. And I've taken Southgate a little bit, but he's overachieved, but I think he's had easy runs as well, to be honest, in these competitions. But he's brought the group together. But anyway, Pep taking over Southgate then at any point? Do you like it?
Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised to see Pep at some point, before he retires, but I can't see it happening in 2024 at all. He's under contract at City until 2025, so why would he rip that up when he's never ripped up a contract in his life and say, I'm going to give up the chance to win another Premier League and Champions League to take over England?
We've said as well, he's too obsessive, isn't he? It has to be day to day on the training ground with Pep, I think.
Yeah. I think, at some point he would love to manage a national team, and it's very complicated with Spain, given, the whole Madrid-Barcelona vibe and his support for the Catalan movement. So,
Royal Madrid.
And his great hero, Marcelo Bielsa, has kind of shown that he's happy to move around and manage various national teams. We've got Ancelotti going to Brazil. I think, Pep said before, a country should always be managed by someone from that country. But I think you could see him making an exception in later life if he wants to experience a national team in a major tournament.
Capello, Sven-Goran Eriksson, come on, Pep. But academy graduates, we're speaking of this. Obviously, Lee Carsley's squad, the under-23s, was comprised of 10 Manchester City players or products of the Manchester City Academy. Once again, Pep controlling football, Pep influencing football, but not just that as well. It's not obviously just Pep Guardiola, it's Calhoun, it's the whole City makeup right now. The flux of City players or products of the City setup is just staggering at the minute, isn't it? And none more so than in the England setup.
Yeah. I think it's six from City and 4 who've left permanently, but I think there are 5 on loan. There's only Rico Lewis, but Rico Lewis as an 18-year-old kind of getting into that under-21 setup, showing how good he is. I think Liam Delap scored, Callum Doyle, who's a defender on loan at Leicester, scored, Cole Palmer very recently of City, but now at Chelsea scored. So it just kind of shows how much talent there is coming through, and talent that's easy to forget. City have been linked with like Evan Ferguson recently, and you think, he looks a really good player, but kind of not too long ago, Liam Delap was scoring on his City debut, and people were expecting great things of him, and it's not happened for him yet, but he's started very well on loan at Hull, and he's scoring goals again, which is a good sign, and it's still a huge mountain for anyone to kind of go out on loan and then come back and prove themselves in the first team, and even more so when you've kind of got Erling Haaland as a number 9 and Julian Alvarez behind him. So it is tough, but there are still loads of good players at City, either in the squad or on loan. Callum Doyle is another who is very, very, very highly rated and looks good wherever you put him, really, and looks kind of made for that City defence. So it's going to be really interesting after his year at Leicester, where they'll be looking for promotion back to the Premier League. What happens with him? And the sooner they're in the England setup, the better, really.
Obviously Enzo Maresca there at Leicester as well, so hopefully that's going to harness it.
Yeah, well, Leicester had started well, and then I think Delap scored a late winner against them for Hull, so Maresca will have been, as annoyed as he'll have been at losing, he'll have had a quiet smile, I'm sure, given how important he was in developing Delap.
Interesting how you mentioned that though in terms of the loan players, and you do look at that and you think McAtee, Taylor Harwood, Bellis as examples, but then you look at the ones who've stayed within the squad and haven't been out on loan. You know, your Fodens recently, your Cole Palmers, your Oscar Bob, who they've not got rid of this season, you know, for obvious reasons. It is interesting how these loan players don't really come back as of yet anyway.
No. And McAtee they didn't really want McAtee to go out last year, and he said, I'm going to be the first one to go out and come back and nail a place in that team. And obviously it didn't happen this year, but they still, you know, they were knocking back 30 million bids for him this summer, so they would not count on him leaving permanently this year. So there's still another chance for him to kind of do well at Sheffield United and then come back and maybe get a place in that team. And the same for Doyle. Doyle, you know, went out on loan really, really early, like at a time when he wasn't really on many people's radar at all. Went out to Sunderland in League One and did really well, and then last year at Coventry and did well in, you know, another team who did fantastically well. So it's that kind of... we're talking with Juan Marlilo about in a press conference about, you know, are young players impatient these days? And he sort of, in a sense they are, but in a sense that's why they get to the top. The ones who get to the top will get to the top quicker, and you know, those players, sooner or later, someone is going to go out on loan and come back into the City first team squad, whether it is Delap, McAtee, Doyle or somebody else. And it will happen. It's just we don't know who.
Right, guys, we'll leave it there. England chat over at last. Southgate chat over, and we'll be back for Act 2. Speak to you in a bit. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. City return to action this weekend. 4 wins out of 4 in a Super Cup under the belt. Not a bad start. A lot of sort of important things coming up there that I want to discuss, including a showdown with Arsenal coming up in 6 games. But I think the first thing to discuss, and we've touched on it on the pod previously, is the new captain. That's got to be selected. You know, Gundogan obviously leaving, Kev now out for sort of like 5 to 6 months. Straight question: who would be yours? I'll set you up with mine straight away, and I'd go Rodri, 100%. I'd go Rodri. Why? Just because I feel like he's Mr. Consistent, he's dependable, reliable, plays pretty much every single game. I feel like he's a bit of a conductor in the midfield as well. I like a midfield general as a captain. I feel bit of a scope of either end of the pitch. And I feel like you're seeing a lot more with Rodri now, a lot more leadership qualities. I feel I'm seeing him talk to the younger lads a lot more on the pitch, sort of with Oscar Bob the other day. And I just think to myself, he's that guy. I know you're going to say, but yeah, I'd go Rodri.
Who do you think I'm going to say?
Diaz.
Well, I would have given it to De Bruyne.
No, he can't though. He's out.
But at the start of the summer, I would say it was kind of either De Bruyne or Diaz. And now I think Kyle Walker's pushed himself to the top. Walker has really kind of taken on a leadership role. And I mean, he was part of the 5 captains anyway. But since kind of City made him captain for the summer games in pre-season, and then he's kind of kept that since. And he's really taken it on to the point of, you know, acting like a captain.
Do you have to play more games though?
Perhaps, but he started every game so far. That's the, you know, when he came through after the Fulham game to speak to us, and it is very, very rare that any player, well, that Walker stops to speak. And in a mixed zone, you're generally looking at like 2 or 3 minutes with a player.
Were you just looking really approachable that day?
Yeah, I think I was, yeah. But you're looking at 2 or 3 or 5 if it's good, or 8 if it's really, really good. And Walker gave us 15, which is like unheard of. But kind of spoke to a guy who feels like a captain and feels like he should be taking on the responsibilities of a captain, which, yes, does involve speaking to the media. And, you know, he was speaking as kind of a leader of the group, and he was talking about his dinner with Pep where they went for sushi, and he was sort of saying, you know, as much as it was like Pep, the natural inclination would be to read that it was like Pep trying to convince him to stay, but it was also him kind of like putting across what the players want for the season and getting back what Pep expects of the players. And, you know, it was kind of like doing what a captain would do. So, yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of Walker as a captain, partly because I like the idea of him coming through the mix zone and talking bullishly about City's chances. But even, you know, like he said, when he said to the players, like, I told them all at the beginning of the season, let's try and blow everyone away in the first half of the year and not be playing catch-up this year in the Premier League. It's like, that is a big thing to say, and something that, you know, could be looked back on and laughed at by rival fans if their team wins the Premier League. But I kind of like it as a play, and I like that kind of, that putting your own sort of slant on the leadership already. So yeah, I think Walker has definitely played himself into contention.
It's a weird little redemption arc as well, isn't it? I'm not saying he was going downhill or anything like that, but if he's able to, not only performance-wise, and I know he's always been like an off-the-pitch leader as well, but if you're able to see him, you know, get a new contract, become the captain, he's in every single Manchester City starting 11, which will be interesting when you're looking at the almost formation tactic, how Pep's going to do that. But if he's able to do that at 33 years of age in a Pep Guardiola system, it's unheard of. I mean, it's completely unique.
Yeah, and he might not play every game, but then, say, Fernandinho didn't play every game when he was captain. By the time he was captain, Vincent Kompany didn't play every game, so you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. You would just have to be there, and he's kind of fit enough that he would always be there. I think he had one big injury last year that kept him out for a few months, but other than that, you know, he was there. But I think the wider sort of things that we're talking about, like Walker, Diaz and Rodri are three leaders, are three captains right there. Haaland's probably another one that absolutely speaks his mind and does not hold back when he gets a chance, because there is also kind of another spot up for grabs in the captaincy group. So it'd be interesting to see who takes that. So you've maybe got De Bruyne, Diaz, Walker, Rodri, and then maybe Haaland. Haaland would be my shout for.
It's a wild card there.
For number 5, yeah. But you kind of, always worth having Haaland's voice in there.
Yeah, I was going to talk, I guess it's longevity, but I was going to say maybe Bernardo's on the periphery, but I guess it's just been a little bit too, I don't know if the City fans had completely acclimatised to Bernardo being captain with all the chat over the last couple of years.
I think Joe wrote a piece on this and kind of said, Bernardo and John Stones are both kind of like jokers in the dressing room, and would maybe, the last year when they were deciding, Stones sort of put leaflets out with like John Stones Man of the People on it to sort of like pitch himself for the captaincy, but obviously taking the mick, and whether you need those characters just to stay as jokers rather than sort of trying to G everyone up, knowing that once they're on the pitch they will have no problem. I have no idea how Bernardo wasn't booked against Fulham, because he was on the bench but he was shouting at the fourth official. He was moaning at every decision, calling for cards for Fulham players from the bench. It was he was basically reffing the game himself. So the good thing about City is they do have a load of experience and leadership, and someone like Kovacic as well could come straight in and make an impact. I think that was Joe's shout for the 5th captain. But I think for the good news is that even people who aren't in that group of 5 will still have their say and be heard. So even if Haaland doesn't get there, it's not going to stop him from saying what he thinks.
Yeah, not all. Champions League coming back, exciting stuff. Red Star Belgrade. at home, Leipzig away, which been a tricky one for City last 2 times, unusually, in the Champions League. They're young boys, but I mean, you're looking at that group and you're expecting listen, I'm being brash, I'm being abrasive, but you'd expect City to absolutely walk it, wouldn't you? The Leipzig away, you're probably looking and thinking, but
Yeah. You sort of see it every year now, and it's like, oh, City have got an easy group, and it's like, yeah, because the top seeds, and they tend to, by top seeds, you tend to get a better group than you would if you weren't top seeds, because you're not getting one of the best 8 teams in the competition. And I know they could have got like more difficult teams, but it's like generally, statistically speaking, you're probably going to get a nice draw. I don't think, like United haven't really got a tricky draw, even though they're not top seeds. They've got Bayern, but they would expect to go through. And, City got Bayern last year and beat them, and got Real Madrid last year and beat them. So when you're the best team in Europe, you're inevitably going to get a good draw because no one's as good as you. Leipzig will be really interesting. They're sort of one of the most fascinating teams in Europe, and they've had one of the most fascinating summer transfer windows. They've got shot of a load of really good players like Guardiola and others, and they brought a load of players in, which is kind of like the Red Bull way. But it will still be interesting to see how they get on. And like you say, away from home, not the easiest. I'm sure Guardiola would be delighted with the draw, but playing Belgrade at home first up, and then if they can get 3 points in Leipzig, then that does set them up for a nice early qualification.
Too easy, Sally, isn't it? Too easy. Yeah.
Well, it never gets exciting until the end, quarterfinals.
But isn't that a privilege that City fans are in that boat?
Yeah, but it's also kind of the competition. I think there's very rarely any shocks as there in the group stages. There might be a few shock results, but you can probably pick 14 or 15 of the 16 teams that are going to go through.
Yeah, you probably could. Like if there was, hypothetically, if like Porto or AC Milan were in the same group, one of them might, if one of them was to go through ahead of the other, you might go, oh, look at that one, but it wouldn't be, wow.
Yeah, it's not like Ludogorets are going to get through at the expense of Real Madrid or anything like that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then obviously with the Champions League, been involved in a lot of the games now, Premier League games coming thick and fast. It's getting to that point again, isn't it, where it's like, right, kicking into gear now. It's once again, it feels like business end already. Obviously not business end, but it feels like these games are so pivotal in the season, and with City having the fast start, it all sort of culminates in and leads up to an Arsenal showdown very soon. I mean, I was having a look at Arsenal's fixtures as well. They've got not an easy next 5 or 6, and Spurs is in there as well. Spurs have got off to a flyer, obviously the North London derby. Already, I mean, I've had a look at the month of September, and I'm looking at it and thinking City are going to win every single game, and they're expecting to win the next 7 out of 7, including the Champions League games, of course. But once again, if City are to play Arsenal, they're able to beat Arsenal. Arsenal maybe falter against Spurs and a couple of other. You're literally looking at it, it's like already, obviously they've faltered against, teams so far, Arsenal. But you're looking at it and thinking, this is going to get away from them here already.
Well, it shows how important that win over United was for them, which could have gone the other way. Because having dropped points at Fulham, if they then lose at home to United, you're then looking at this block of games and thinking, Spurs and City at home, if you don't win those, like, you are really, really in trouble, and sort of you're up against it, because you kind of got to win your home games. But because they've beaten United, there's now kind of less kind of pressure. We've not seen the inquests into what's wrong with Arsenal this season, and they can now target those games and think, yeah, we can try and win them and play without the pressure of them absolutely being must win. But at the same time, City, of all the games that City have got coming up in this next block before the October break, Arsenal away is the one. If they if they win that game, then a few draws before that will be quickly forgotten, because to sort of end the run before the October break by beating Arsenal, that would really kind of lift them and remind everyone that they're not to be messed with.
I think the Premier League needed that reminder when City played Arsenal last season down at the Emirates. It was like, oh, yeah, City is still the top dogs here.
Yeah. And the games last year against Arsenal were really, really important, and because they played them in the FA Cup as well at the Etihad in January, the end of January, when Arsenal were by far the better team and their January signings looked good, and City kind of just weren't fortunate, I suppose, to win, but it could have gone either way. Played them at the Emirates, and they kind of admittedly got out of jail a bit. It could have almost should have gone the other way, but Arsenal didn't take the chances. And then by the time they played them at the Etihad, City just steamrolled them. It was like men against boys. But Arsenal winning the Community Shield, and you've got them saying, oh yeah, that chip's off our shoulder, where we now feel we can beat them in the league. Here's your chance, boys. So it's one of them where if Arsenal win, it's fantastic for them, but City kind of aren't seen as out of it because they always come good. But if City beat Arsenal, like you say, it's almost already kind of like, I don't think you're going to beat City this year.
Especially with City taking the City top already. It's completely different. The makeup, it's obviously the hunter and the hunted, but City being top and just carrying on what they already did it.
Yeah, and it happened again a few years ago, but I feel like City play Arsenal away, Liverpool away, United away and Chelsea away in the first half of the season, which means that they've got all those to come in the second half of the season, and they've not dropped a point at the Etihad this calendar year, but you're always stronger in your home games, so it's like City's rivals need for them to not be top by the time like January comes, because City should be stronger with all those home games against rivals. So if City are top, having played all those teams away from home, then everyone else needs to be pretty worried.
Especially with Kev coming back and that last 6 months. But yeah, guys, we'll leave that act here. We'll be back in just a second discussing the West Ham game. See you in a sec. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We're discussing West Ham. Discussed it on the last podcast, but we're nearer now. So West Ham United away for City. The next game coming up. Started well. West Ham, very, very well. Obviously, departure of Declan Rice. You expected a little bit of a hole there, but yeah, is it Alvarez who's come in central midfield for them? As Edson Alvarez, I think he's come in. He seems to have filled the void pretty nicely. So not going to be simple for City, this one, is it?
No, and James Ward-Prowse will test City's set piece defending. They've been party poopers this season, West Ham, basically. They kind of deflated Chelsea's early optimism. They sent Brighton packing. It's kind of, I think I looked, and City have got kind of almost like the least direct attack. You know, they take loads of passes and time, and West Ham are like completely the opposite. They'll just counter and in lightning speed and score that way. So it's going to be two very different styles. Sort of a few years ago, West Ham started getting the better of City by like letting them have the wings and just saying, we will defend the inside and you can have whatever space you want on the wings, but you're not going to get in our box, basically. You're not going to beat us that way, and then we'll counter. And City went there on the first day of last season and just did not use the wings at all. Just like the fullbacks came in, they just played right through the middle, and Moyes admitted afterwards he just didn't know what to do. He'd planned for similar, and then City sort of finally responded, and Pep found a way to sort of beat the tactic that had been frustrating them. So I'm expecting both Pep, who will be back, which is a boost for City, and Moyes to sort of both try and have something up their sleeves to get the better of the other one.
Yeah, I think traditional as well. You've looked at maybe Pep Guardiola's sides previously, and gone physicality maybe the thing, height or whatever, or bullying Pep's side. They're great technically, but can they deal with the aerial assault? Well, they can now. There is, Pep's side, this Man City side are just physically imposing, aren't they?
Yeah, like Rodri is enormous, Haaland is enormous, and the back four are all enormous, really. They won a treble with 4 centre backs, so they're very, very tough to beat from dead ball situations. Now they kind of turn that weakness into a huge strength, so they'll certainly be going toe for toe and head to head and everything else you can imagine.
Leg to leg.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, prediction for this one?
I think it'd be 2-0. 2-0 to City. I can see sort of similar to last year, really. Just, West Ham making a game of it, but Haaland proving too good.
Yeah, I can see that. It's so interesting what you said there about Moyes. It's like, 'cause he just gets to the stage where you're like, you can combat them, you can try combat them tactically, but when you're just coming out afterwards and saying, look, I tried, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, but then I think, he kind of gets a bad rap with sort of how badly it went at United. People see him as like a bit of a joke figure and like...
European champion now.
Tactically not up to it, but he has been really, really good at West Ham, and yeah, they've won European trophy, and the crowd will be bang up for it. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I can see. I said this last time, but I can see a bit of a rout. I don't know. I feel they're going to be on pomp. They've had the rest, City, and Stones and Grealish, we haven't spoken about as well, potentially coming back. They're on a bit of a wave at the minute, I think, and I think West Ham's wave isn't going to be able to compete, obviously, with City's wave. 4-1. Yeah, I think they're going to... I said 4-0 last time as well. I'm just all about the fours. But a City win is what we're both predicting, basically. Yeah. All right, everybody. That's going to conclude the Talking City podcast for a Tuesday, unusually. We'll be back on Friday talking Manchester City, of course. Make sure you're liking all of our content across our socials as well. Make sure you check us out on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all that good stuff. Hit a like on this video as well if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star rating on all of your favourite podcast providers, and we'll see you in a bit. Cheers.